The abduction of Morgan, the circumstances involving the possibility that he survived and that he remained hidden for one reason or another for a long period of time, such ideas, such circumstances, do not necessarily tax our imagination to any overwhelming degree. But we move from this into something in which the science fiction element begins to appear. The contents of the book, as far as its story is concerned, has to come under one of three headings. Either it is a factual experience utterly beyond belief. Second, it is a complete work of fiction, using historical circumstances for a springboard, or else the entire work is essentially allegorical. Now, there is every possibility that the whole book is a very ingenious piece of symbolism, and that there is no part of it, with perhaps the exception of the early parts or its early chapters, that are even intended to be taken literally. That it actually, instead of being the story of the journey of a man to a mysterious region, that it is actually the story of the journey of man through a mysterious universe, the universe in which he now lives. And the universe is unfolded for him very much in the spirit of the Eleusinian and Mithraic rites of ancient Greece and Persia. There is a thin veiling by means of which it would be possible, if penetrated through this veil, to assume that the whole story represents a restoration and reveal it to us rather as the adventure of a person passing through the conditions of his own internal life. Such a concept is highly possible, and Mr. Knapp gave it a lot of thought and said that certainly, if the story was not factually true to the end, then it must certainly be symbolically significant or important. That the story may have had unknown authors entirely different from any that we know is not incredible or impossible. But Mr. Knapp, whose early association with Lloyd and with practically all the persons involved, who personally knew Llewellyn Drury, the original custodian of the manuscript, Mr. Knapp said that on several occasions he actually examined the original manuscript in the autograph of the unknown author. All of these circumstances, of course, led Knapp to assume that there might be a very literal meaning. That this literal meaning, however, could drift into allegory, and from a certain foundation we might move to the realization that this was the story of the actual inner experience of Captain William Morgan in the years following his realization that he had made, at least in his time, a serious mistake. This possibility also implying that the author had learned something of the greatest importance as far as his own moral and ethical life were concerned. Now, there is one other element which we also have to mention in connection with the story of Etadolphe, because we are trying to summarize a very big subject, and how big it is, you will only know if you make a very careful study of the book. The story has certain basic scientific interest. This has led some people to suspect that the scientific facts contained in the work would be possibly reminiscent of the personal and chosen career of John Uri Lloyd. He was a man who might have possessed this knowledge himself. This is true. It is never possible to know just how much knowledge anyone possesses, and it is quite possible that as a serious and scholarly individual, he had come to certain conclusions concerning essential principles of knowledge, which would have been rather difficult for him to transmit literally without bringing down upon himself a terrible condemnation, but which presented in a semi-fictional manner might intrigue the mind and cause the reader to perhaps investigate for himself somewhat further than he would otherwise have done. One fragment of this scientific knowledge, probably the most important fragment, if we can call it such, would be the background or the environment in which a large part of the story is laid. This environment lies beneath the surface of the earth. If this environment be regarded as a serious and solemn effort to understand the construction of the subterranean regions beneath the earth's surface, then Mr. Lloyd was either a man of great imagination or a prophet of unusually good parts. Actually, today, in the world of semi-science, in the world of science fiction, we are gaining an increasing number of accounts of the possible existence of regions beneath the earth's surface that are rather different from those which our geologists might first assume to be there. One of the interesting angles of this story is that it follows through a kind of mysterious inter-earth cosmogony, something happenings beneath the earth's surface, a little reminiscent of Dante's journey through the Inferno. Dante's journey into an underworld we know to have been a great political satire, one of the most brutal and at the same time most dramatic in the history of human literature. Yet in order to create this world of his Inferno and his Paradiso, Dante actually fabricated a complete concept of the universe. He formed a very profound concept of the stratification and structure of the earth beneath its surface. He built this scheme so perfectly and so completely that when he used it, he was able to make a very logical unfoldment, step by step, of this underworld construction, as we find Dante presumably being led through the Inferno by his guide, Virgil. In through the book, at a number of points, are introduced scientific experiments. Most of them are extremely simple, and they were advanced originally in an effort to convince Llewellyn Drury of the honesty and accuracy of certain statements to which he took offense. The original author of the manuscript asked Mr. Drury to ponder the various sections well, and if a question arose or a doubt arose as to the truth of these statements, particularly those of a scientific nature, he was to state this doubt, and the original author would attempt to solve it for him. In each case where a doubt was raised, the mysterious author did meet the doubt and solved it to the point where at least Mr. Drury was unable to argue any further. Many of the points involved, such as the demonstration of the possibility of seeing your own brain, or the demonstration, for example, of water rising above its own level, and things of that nature, seemed incredible, but by very simple experiments which are set forth in detail in the book and can be copied by anyone, the truth of the statements was proved or objectively demonstrated. There are many statements, therefore, which can be checked, and these statements were certainly inconsistent with the general thinking of the time, although perhaps some of them are not as astonishing to us as they would have been to the reader in 1895. Actually, also, there is a peculiar line of semi-bitterness running underneath the surface of the book. It indicates a person who is a little more than merely a wandering character in an underworld, as in the case of Dante and his Inferno. Here we have a man in Edadorfa who obviously carries a very definite chip on his shoulder concerning scientific attitudes, scientific methods, and scientific learning. He practically states, to be an essential formula, that whatever science states on any subject, the reverse will ultimately prove to be true. That we are approaching knowledge far too superficially.